Hello, YouTubers. Joe Cruiser here on Monday, May 19th, 2014 at about 4:30 in the afternoon Eastern Daylight Time. Now, Paul and I have just been sitting here shooting the breeze. You know, he told me some stuff that happened at the hotel. Apparently, there was a large incident, a large incident in the parking lot with a fire hose being used to, flush out the parking lot that involved, his truck and open windows. But fortunately, no damage. And I don't know why I got thinking about this, but I got thinking about, it had to be because he was talking about some of the Latin American women that are, do housekeeping at the hotel. Or, clean the room. Well, housekeeping at the hotel, clean the rooms. And he does some of that too, but he's technically sort of, he sort of runs around and runs interference for all this sort of stuff. And but I got thinking about my Spanish teacher in high school, and her name was, and she's dead now, so I can use the name. Her name was Mrs. Fernandez. Nowadays, I guess we'd have to call her Ms. Fernandez. Buzz. Her first name was Myrta, or Mirta. Well, no, Mirta is more of a German pronunciation, Myrta. She was affectionately known among most people as Mert. She was from Cuba, and she had fled Cuba shortly after the communist takeover. The communist takeover took in 1959, but they didn't really start killing off all the middle-class intellectuals. The corrupt bourgeoisie, if you will. That's very Maoist, actually, isn't it? But anyway, around 61, 62, 63, they started, certainly after the Bay of Pigs, they started killing off a lot of these guys. And her husband was a physician, and she had the wonderful experience of seeing him gunned down in the entry hall of their house before her very eyes. Oh yes, it's the communist paradise of Cuba, isn't it? I can't believe we've never taken these guys out. I mean, as much as you may have to deal with some of these, dudes over in the Middle East, 90 miles off our shores is something far more evil and far more ongoing than than the way these guys treat each other over in the Middle East. Because these guys over in the Middle East have treated each other that way for centuries. At one point we actually owned Cuba after the Spanish-American War. And we set it free, and look what happened. Guess what we probably should have done? But no. Very much like today, the various, forms of American racism, didn't want all these dark-skinned people, being part of the United States, let alone possibly having 2 votes in the United States Senate, assuming that you got admitted as a state. So we turned it loose, and look what happened. A big dictator got overthrown by a communist who has now oppressed all his people for the last, almost 60 years now. 55 years anyway. 59 to now. Lowlives. Well, having said that, now today's story, once again, it takes about 4.5 minutes to crank into it, doesn't it? Today's story involves Mrs. Fernandez, and I took 3 years of Spanish from her in high school, and I was talking with Paul about the third year. Her emphasis was on being able to write Spanish. And she would bring in Spanish language newspapers, and then we had to write sort of pretend article as if we're writing a follow-up article, to what's in one of the Spanish language newspapers. Excuse me. And and the idea was to get you to use, different, verb tenses and moods and that sort of thing. And hang on a minute. You're just going to put up with that for a minute. Well, anyway, so different verb moods and tenses and that sort of vocabulary. But she wasn't so big on vocabulary, but she was trying to get us to use the verbs and, different the past and subjunctive mood and that sort of thing.
Down. Again, press 9 down.
Yeah, just cut that. Thank you very much. Low lives. Yet another set of low lives appear in this video. Well, anyway, so having said that, one day, and this I had to take. I wanted to take 3 years of Spanish because I figured it would get me out of the language requirement at Ohio State, and it ultimately did. But unfortunately, I had to give up. Choir, so I could end up. I could keep taking band or being in band, but I had to give up going to choir. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. So there was a guy that sat right over by the window. Now we had a high school that was built in 1922. Wonderful high, casement, up and down windows, and 3 stories high, big high ceilings, no air conditioning. It was wonderful. It was great. And you open those windows up in the springtime, and it was great. So this guy came in, and he would oftentimes wear a jock strap with a cup. And what he'd do is he'd sit there and he'd play like a drum beat on his cup with his hands. And he'd do it until Mrs. Fernandez noticed, and she'd look around, what's that noise? What's that noise? And she'd go look out the hall. She'd say, what's that noise? And nobody would say anything, of course. And and then when she settled back down and started teaching again, he'd go, he'd do some more stuff, and so. Well, actually, just to get down to really telling you the nitty gritty, one day he actually whipped out his dick and jacked off under his desk. Well, these things happen, don't they? Sometimes in high school. So one day he, not the same day that I just referenced, he. Well, she Mrs. Fernandez left the room for some reason for actually quite a long time. I don't know if she had to go to the can or there was some, who knows. But she was gone for about 10 minutes. Meanwhile, as soon as she left the room, this guy sends his buddy downstairs, down the 3 flights of stairs, and the guy sent away lay down under the windows. So that if you look out the window from the 3rd floor from the classroom, this guy was kind of like along like this. Like he'd fallen out of the window and was injured. Well, eventually she comes back, and and this guy says, Mrs. Fernandez, so Luis has jumped out the window. And she goes over, she looks, and the guy's lying sort of like on the ground, and she freaks out. I mean, she scampers out of the room again and gets the assistant principal, and he comes up, and Paul just raised the point. Why didn't you just go outside and look at the guy? But he came up, and he looks out, and he sees nothing. Well, because meanwhile, while he was coming up, Luis had scampered back up the stairs and was sitting in his seat in the classroom. It's just terrible to horse with that woman that way. I mean, but even if you're really not part of it, you know, you sort of had to enjoy it. She died at 53 with a big heart attack or stroke or something, and uh, I had occasion to go to her apartment. She was living up, well, sort of the north end of Lebanon at that time in one of these small apartments, and excuse me, and I think that was when I was working for the lawyers, and I had to deliver some documents or something, and I don't know what they were. I didn't look at them. That wasn't my job. Uh, but she dropped dead. At least she wasn't shot by a bunch of communist thugs in her living room.
Or doorway to the house.
Yeah, well, gosh, and these guys are still in power down there. It's just, it just makes you want to throw up. And oh no, we can't let people in the United States. We can't let people come in and be free. No, we're gonna maintain our borders. Give me a break. Give me a break. Period. Well, alrighty. Remember, guys. Alrighty. Bye bye.